It's happening! Or I guess more like it's happened. Either way, we finally got an official War for Cybertron Ratchet. Like a lot of people, I really like most of the War for Cybertron game designs, and Ratchet here in particular was a particular favorite of mine. I wanted to get the Planet X version, but between the reported build quality issues and just kind of eventually losing interest in the overall design that Planet X itself put out, I just sort of given up on having something like this, but now here we are. We are starting in robot mode because, well, one, that's how he comes packaged, and I also, too, kind of feel like it'll be important to go over those shoulders when going into vehicle mode. But dang, does he look good. I'm not sure how well it's coming across on camera, and I'm not sure how well the post-production stuff might be able to adjust things, but the white is a little dingy looking. But considering this is a War for Cybertron design, that doesn't really bug me. If anything, I kind of want to add some weathering to really pull out some of the details and make him look more like he's in the middle of a centuries-long war. Because this guy does have a fair bit of detail, especially right around the upper body and thighs and stuff. There's a lot of nice molded detail in there. But yeah, I think the white is fine, and I do like all the extra bits of red that pop up in a few spots to keep the deco from looking too bland overall. He could probably do with a little more red, to be honest, but I am sure we'll get a Reaper Label set eventually. We've got a lot of Reaper Label sets for the Studio Series series, so I'm sure we'll get some for this guy. Or I could just paint him myself if I ever work up the energy to start doing stuff like that again. Really, though, the torso is where this design shines for me. I love the layered, almost ribcage-looking chest section with the red abdominal, whatever you want to call that, and the black up here for an implied windshield. I say implied because this is a fake part. 2 tones of red in the abdomen section here, where you've got metallic red around the outside and then a much brighter non-metallic red in the center. I also dig the small, I guess you could call them pylons on either side of the head and how they complement the boxy shoulder pads. And of course, the shoulder pads look nice, bulk out the shoulders well, and the tampographed heartbeat, syncopation, whatever symbols both fit the character and break up a bunch of white right there. I do kind of wish there was either a little more sculpted detail in the shins to better match the texture over the rest of the figure, or a bit less in the thighs and forearms to make it look more like he's covered in armor plating. I feel like the added detailing would probably make more sense rather than removing the molding. But point is, it's a little imbalanced. It does still look the part, though. If anything, I kind of feel like Ratchet hits the War for Cybertron aesthetic the best out of the Studio Series line so far, but maybe that's just me. Also, because of the way the feet are designed, the shins sort of slope forward. Put that out of the way, you can kind of see they kind of slope forward a little bit. I would have preferred having a joint in the ankles so you could rotate them forward so that the legs could be a little bit more straight, relative to the ground. But in all honesty, it's not that bad in person. Like this is not Fall of Cybertron Shockwave levels of like digitigrade. You got to angle the shins weird type stuff. This is very slight. The biggest robot mode highlight for me has got to be that head, though. The helmeted crests definitely evoke a more classic Ratchet look, but they're a little more stylized, and the head crest is like super robot levels of pointy in a good way. That face, though, wow. The white on red with the blue eyes is great and all, but there's just something about the face design, like the sculpt specifically, that hits really hard for me. I love the way the face is almost split between the upper and lower portions of the jaw, and you can kind of see a bit of what looks like wiring in between those two parts. It might be a little too hardcore for Ratchet, but I don't care. It looks really cool. That head is on a ball joint that gets you rotation and some up and down, but you don't get any tilts, unfortunately. The shoulders can go out past 90 if you get the shoulder pads out of the way, like way out of the way. Zoom out a little bit here so you can see more of what I'm talking about. There we go. So they can go out past 90. They can technically rotate 360, But again, the shoulder pads get in the way. You have to kind of move them and work around it. But they are on a double, it's like a swivel and a ball joint armature, so they're reasonably able to get out of the way. The arms also get bicep swivels and 90-degree elbows, along with wrist swivels. That's nice. Boo for putting the gaps at the tops of the fists rather than at the bottoms, though. That seems to be happening a lot lately. There is a full... Okay, we'll deal with that in a second. There is a full waist rotation. It's very tight on this, but it goes all the way around. The backpack does not get in the way at all, because you can see it's actually above where the hips are, so you don't have to worry about anything clashing when you use the waist swivel. The forward hip motion goes just a little bit past 90 going forward, and a little bit under 90 going back. Or if you get the backpack out of the way, it can actually reach 90 because the giant calves are banging into that thing. And we have an Astrid. Hi. Oh, you meowed right into the microphone. That was great timing. You know what else bends 90 degrees? Which, as I think about it, is kind of a silly segue because we didn't talk about bending since the elbows, but whatever. The knees. The knees bend 90 degrees, or just about 90 degrees. The thigh swivel right above those knees also can go all the way around. So there is that. I would have preferred a more proper thigh swivel, like maybe up around here rather than right above the knee, but at least it's not below the knee. I hate when toys do that. And the ankles can not rotate, but they can move up to about 90 degrees. They're weirdly detented, though, for some reason, which makes adjusting them a little tricky sometimes. I don't know why they couldn't have, not done that, but this is what we got. It just kind of snaps into place. It's not you can cheat it, but it just makes using the ankle tilts a little bit weird, because if you want to angle them out slightly and it doesn't go to the detent, you have to it's weird to try and adjust it when it wants to snap into one position, All things considered, Studio Series War for Cybertron Ratchet can get pretty expressive, which is cool. And he looks good with his weapons, which I need to actually start talking about now. His gun, which was stored on the back, there's a tab here and a kind of keyed slot on the underside of the gun. It's hard to see. Let me zoom in more. There, you can see it. There's it's not a flat rectangle on one side. It's got this little divot. And the tab has a similar thing. So you want to put this on a specific way, but it just tabs onto the back like that. And the way I had the axe attached before, it's not an official thing because I can't find a way to attach the axe to the gun at all. So I was just hooking it over like that, which works. And as you saw, it held on pretty well. If you want to store the axe, also, the axe has its own little keyed tab right there in the center towards the top. And that tabs in that way, but then the axe handle comes down almost all the way to act like a tripod, and I don't really like how that looks, or gets in the way of things. I really wish that the tab for attaching the axe here was in a different position, but whatever. Anyway, the gun, it does look pretty good, and I like the 3-pronged spinny bit on the end. It doesn't rotate freely. There's definitely a lot of friction there, but I don't mind that. I think this is supposed to be a repair gun, but I couldn't find any official name for it in the instructions, and I didn't feel like looking up the WFC wiki. So we'll just call it a repair gun. I'm reasonably sure that it could potentially use a blast effect, but even the small blast effect, it doesn't actually fit all the way because these things are too narrow for this to fit in there. So blast effect use might be a little limited. You can also, if you want, take the handle of the axe and plug it in there, and that does plug in. So that's why I'm assuming it's 5mm compatible. This is a bit awkward looking when you peg it into the hand. I mean, it does have a peg, so you can peg it into the hand, which I think is great. But it does look a little awkward like that. But since this is a gamer edition figure, you can detach the right forearm and plug it in there instead. And this is pretty cool, actually. I like how the forearm detailing, like the molding, actually continues into, like, between the detachable part and the non-detachable part. So, like, when you pull this out, you can kind of see how it separates. I just like how that molded detail carries through. It makes it look a lot more cohesive when the forearm is plugged in. But it just unplugs, and then you can plug this into its spot. The intention for it, you can actually kind of see how this is more rectangular shaped than square shaped. You actually want to plug it in this way with this bit going over the wheel, like so. And honestly, this looks fantastic. It integrates with the arm way better than any of the other Studio Series War for Cybertron figures I've seen so far, whether I've owned them or seen videos on them. This is great. The axe is a different story, though. Don't get me wrong, it looks great, and I like how what are supposed to be the sharp bits are painted in this neon orange. What sucks is I have a really hard time getting him to actually hold this thing. Granted, when I wrote the script, I could not get him to hold this at all. And since then, I think I've managed to kind of work things a little bit so that he can actually hold it, but like, it is obnoxiously difficult, at least at first, to try and get him to just straight up hold the axe. What you do is you just unplug the handle, and then this gets shoved up through the fist. And like before, when I was doing it, it would go about halfway and just stop and refuse to go any further, and I didn't want to push it because I didn't want to get things stuck or break anything, but you can just keep pushing. And it's a little tricky, but just keep pushing, and there we go. And then axe in hand, there he is with his first aid axe, I guess. But you can plug the axe head into the forearm peg, which is another thing this figure does better than all of the other figures in this subline that I've handled so far. And this does actually look pretty dang cool. It doesn't integrate quite as amazingly as the gun, but this does still look cool. Now, we are left with this forearm. This gimmick has been part of the Gamer Edition series from the start, and I've never really been much of a fan. Most of the time, the weapons don't look right when they're attached. They're usually like too small or just kind of awkward looking. And you're always left with a forearm hanging off of a robot's butt. Ratchet, though, handles this perfectly. Obviously, there's the clearly superior weapon integration for both the melee and long-range healing gun. But check this out. Pop open the backpack. It just tabs in back here. Pop this open, and there's this tab on the forearm and this little slot right here around the spine. You just angle this in, and this little groove will go over this strut here. You angle this in and tab it into the back. And then you fold this back up and tab the backpack together again. And where'd the forearm go? If you don't know to look for it, there's no way you'd be able to tell. There's a whole forearm stuffed in this backpack, and I love this. If future Studio Series War for Cybertron figures don't do this, I'm going to be very upset. It's practically invisible. Like, you could just kind of, if you know it's there, you can see the back of the hand plate thing, like this piece up there. And you can see like the sides here, but like it just looks like part of the backpack. It's basically just gone. And I love that, because now this makes me actually want to display him like this, because the arm is just tucked away inside his rucksack, I guess. While it would upset me if future new molds for War for Cybertron and Studio Series don't have this level of amazing integration with forearm storage, what doesn't upset me is Ratchet's height. He's definitely taller than a Modern Deluxe, and maybe a little shorter than a Voyager, or at least a tall Voyager, but that's fine. And actually, when you look at him next to some other Ratchets, he ends up being the tallest of the bunch. Well above the Studio Series Deluxe, a bit taller than the Studio Series 86 Voyager, and even a little bit bigger than the Siege Deluxe, which was, back when Deluxes were apparently more like Voyager height. He's maybe not as dense and full of parts as the 86 figure, but he still looked adequately bulky for my taste. I don't know, I just like this robot mode, okay? Alright, now before we do the vehicle mode thing, I do have a Ko-fi or Patreon, links to both at the end of the video as well as down in the description if you want to support the channel. Otherwise, typical YouTube stuff of like, comment, share, subscribe is also much appreciated. Now, transforming Ratchet is a very fine thing. Like, I actually do enjoy the transformation. It's just the shoulder pad placement is not clear and not immediately intuitive, especially because there are these flaps here that make you think they have to like bend all the way in for the transformation, and they don't. But we'll get to that. So first thing, I'm going to rotate the waist 180 degrees. Just kind of leave the legs for now, but what we are going to do is peg the ankles in. There's this little tab here and this little notch in the red plastic right there. You just want to plug that in all the way. I'm just doing that now so I don't forget to do it later. I'm going to unpeg the backpack and unfold it, and that just stays like that for now. The torso will unclip from here. It actually pegs in really securely, so that's something when you're going into robot mode, you want to make sure this clicks into place. Because when I got mine first, it wasn't clicked in, and as a result, the panel that the head sits on wouldn't quite sit flush with the torso, but when you click it in, it actually makes sure that panel that the head is on can't go any further down. So yeah, that's why you want to make sure you click it in. But anyway, unclick this. Bring this forward. I'm going to do this now before I forget. You take the tiny Autobot logo on the chest and you rotate the panel around to hide it. That's kind of silly, but I like it. All right, then this will probably go down on its own, but I'm just pushing it down now. So stretch all this out. Now can work on the shoulder pads and the arms. For the shoulder pads, what you actually want to do is rotate them back and bring them together behind the head like this. This is the orientation you want them in. You don't have to push anything in or anything like that. You just want them like this, because what will happen is when you straighten out this armature and then straighten out this armature, this back part of the torso will sit inside the shoulder pads. They kind of cradle it, and then those little hinges can tuck the shoulder pads in a little bit more. Like, this will happen automatically whether you touch them or not because of the way the guy transforms, but like, this is why that joint is there. So yeah, you want to just make sure that the shoulder pads are oriented like this. That is the trick. It's not that difficult. It's just that the instructions make it very unintuitive to figure out. So for the arms, what you want to do, there is a secondary hinge here that allows you to bring the arm down and in. You want to bring that down and kind of rotate the arm so that this tab slot can tab over this tab in the center here. And that just kind of angles in and tabs in. Actually, I should have done this too. There's this is a mess. There is a hidden joint back here that allows you to unpeg, whatever, the bicep from the shoulder and rotate it back. You want to do that first because then it gives you the room to get this angled in, because you actually kind of need to angle the arm up a little bit for it to peg in. So it's at this kind of angle here. So you do that, then you can rotate the forearm and bring it around. And this, well, we'll leave it out for now because we're going to have to do the legs too. But again, you want to kind of rotate this, bring this back, and swing this up and in so that it tabs into that bit inside the torso. And that is about as much as we're going to do for that. So for the legs, I'm going to straighten out. Actually, we're not going to straighten out the legs. We're going to rotate them 180 degrees at the knee, because as you can tell, these little bits here are going to tap together. But before that happens, you want to take the shin piece and untab it, because it actually tabs in here on the red plastic, but also here on this white piece. Once that's untabbed, you can accordion out this piece, and then bring out this piece. It's on a double hinge tucked in there. And this comes around, and as you bring this around, you want to unfold this panel, which gives you the clearance to bring this back more. And this panel, there's a little tab here that tabs in here. So you bring this back and tab this in. And this panel, you just kind of straighten it out and leave it out and up for now. Take this joint and pop that and bring this around. And this will just kind of sit like this. We'll kind of bring it around like that for now because we have to do the other leg. So I'm going to do this hopefully a little bit less messy. Bring this up. Bring this down and out. Bring this out a little bit so we can swing this up and then get all this in place. Tab this in here, which doesn't it doesn't like to stay tabbed in on this side, but it'll be okay once we actually get to the vehicle mode. And then this swings in. And also notice they put the copyright information on the inside, so you don't have to worry about it destroying the aesthetics of the figure. I'm still mad about what they did to G1 Universe Soundwave. Anyway, Legacy G1 Universe Soundwave. Anyway, these legs tap together. The shin plates can kind of stay down for now. This swings in, and as you would expect, all of these panels tab together, including up here. This all plugs and tabs together. The arms rotate in, and there is this opening here on the inside of the forearm that will actually tab over this big chunky tab right here on the torso. So you angle that, plug that in. Why aren't you plugging it in? There we go. And same deal on this arm. Just bring that in, plug it in. Then you can mess around with aligning all of this stuff because you want these bits to line up here. The feet, which are like this, actually straighten out to make the kind of side skirts of the car or vehicle mode, whatever, which is kind of cool. In addition to the knees tabbing together, the shin pieces also plug together. And then these come up, and there are little slots on the fronts of the shins that tab over these little tabs on the tops of what used to be the feet. So you bring that in, tab that in, that helps to lock the vehicle mode together from the bottom. Then this entire flap comes down, and this will tab into that spot where the fist or forearm tabbed in robot mode for tucking away. This tab, this tiny tab up here, will tab in right at the front here. And then in addition to that, these tabs on the forearms will tab into these little slots under here. And there's a lot of stuff tabbing in. And also these there are these little bits inside here that go into these little slots on the front of the robot torso. So you just bring all this in, tab all this down, bring these in to make sure that they're tapped into place, make sure that all of this is tapped in. It's very secure once you get it tabbed together, but it is a lot of tabs that you have to line up. And then with all that done, you can just take this, bring it down, and these two bits come together to form a tab that plug in right back there. And also there are these little tabs on either side that kind of go under the flap here. That helps to secure things even further. And there we go. That was not as complicated as I was making it out to be. It just has been a minute since I transformed this guy. And yeah, really the only issue, like I was able to figure this out on my own without instructions, except for the orientation of those shoulder pads. That was annoying. But once you get the shoulder pads figured out, this transformation is pretty straightforward and actually pretty cool. It does a lot of really interesting things. But yeah, there is War for Cybertron Ratchet's vehicle mode. I really like that transformation. It's complex enough to keep me engaged, but it isn't fiddly. And I really like how so much of the back of the vehicle mode is just collapsed into the lower legs. Like, So much of this is just lower leg and calf. Figuring out how to line up those shoulder pads was a huge pain. The instructions, as I said, do a terrible job of showing how they're supposed to work, and it's not as intuitive as the rest of the transformation. But once I got it, it's pretty good. And the alt mode is this cool but also kind of cute Cybertronian potato van that Hasbro is calling a sports car mode for some bizarre reason. This is a lot of things. A sports car is not one of them. Anyway, I like how it breaks up the white by using the red detailing mostly around what might count as the grille section, over the 4 wheel wells, some lines throughout the wheels, and up on the roof. The colors are a little messy looking around the back because the sculpting doesn't line up as smoothly. Especially right up in here, there's little triangle bits. But I do like how they at least tried to make the colors break up in a more cohesive way, especially around the bumper and how this shape is kind of integrated and molded in. The metallic black, I think, that they used for the front and side windows, are these windows? That also looks great, and it contrasts with the white really well, and I definitely like that they covered all of them, not just the front. Sure, the white paint that they used for the backs of the hands, which are a solid piece that's molded in red, hence the need to paint them, it doesn't really match the white plastic, but these spots are too small to bother me all that much. It's nothing like having the entire roof of a vehicle clearly the wrong shade of yellow or anything like that. It's not spectacular, but it's fine. You can store both weapons in this mode too, which I do appreciate in the sense that they have somewhere to go, but they don't really look great when they're attached. The gun plugging into the back like a rear-mounted bike rack is okay-ish, but the axe plugging into the top like some kind of tank turret just looks goofy. There's not enough room for either of them to store inside the vehicle mode, so this is just kind of how it has to be, but it's still not great. And for some reason, there's no way to plug just the gun into the roof, which seems like it should have been a given. You can kind of cheat by using one of the 2 little tabs for the side of the gun into one of these slots on the axe. You can kind of do that, but that looks even sillier, and I'm not really convinced that the tabs are supposed to work that way. But the regular storage is just these 2 slots on the back here, the 2 tabs on the side of the gun. And for the axe, you'd think this tab is where it plugs in, and it does kind of sit, but it's actually these 2 tabs here go into, and it's on both sides of the axe, but there are these semi-U-shaped tabs here. Those are what plug into these 2 tabs, and then this slot just kind of sits over this other tab. So yeah, that is how that plugs in. And again, it doesn't look great, but it is storage, so whatever. I am going to remove them though, because the alt mode looks better without them. Now this is where Ratchet's size gets a little bit more interesting, because this alt mode fills out. I really like how the vehicle just kind of spreads out from the robot, resulting in a van thing that's not necessarily taller than your average modern deluxe, but it is way wider. It makes the alt mode look way more dense, but what's really interesting to me is that it's not necessarily an illusion either. Aside from a bit of open air around the back under the vehicle shell, there's not a lot of interior space with this engineering, so it's not really a cheat to make the alt mode look bigger. But it still pulls off something that at least is a little akin to mass shifting. I dig it. It's neat. And with that, I'm done talking about Studio Series War for Cybertron Ratchet. Can you tell I really like this figure? You might think I'm being too positive because I spent years hoping for a figure like this, but if anything, that's what makes my love for this thing all the more impressive. I wanted this figure to be great, but I'm so used to disappointment, I was expecting it to just be okay. Instead, I think it's almost everything I was hoping for. Within a modern Voyager budget. He is absolutely not perfect, but none of those imperfections get in the way of my enjoyment. And there's plenty of cool stuff going on with the design, sculpt, and engineering for me to like this thing, even if it wasn't specifically a War for Cybertron Ratchet. Well worth getting as far as I'm concerned. But that's enough of what I think. What do you all think of this guy? Whatever your thoughts, feel free to chime in down below. I always enjoy hearing from you all. Thank you everybody for watching, and I will be seeing you in whatever the next video turns out to be.